Tonight at 10, stepping up the vaccine booster campaign across the UK, with firefighters and soldiers among those called to help out. This was the scene at a centre in Llangefni, and Welsh ministers admit that the booster programme will put the NHS under immense pressure.
We recognise that the workforce is absolutely exhausted, which is why we are really making sure that the net is really cast much wider this time to make sure that we can ask those volunteers to come back in.
As preparations for Christmas go ahead in Downing Street and elsewhere, some doctors say it's best to avoid large gatherings, but ministers say it's the individual's responsibility.
We've all got a role to play in this. This is a national mission, what we set out in vaccinations. We can all play a role.
We'll have more on the situation here in Wales and, of course, across the UK, also on the programme. Reforming the social care system in England. More details emerge of the £1.7 billion to be raised by a new levy. Efforts continue to restore power to tens of thousands of people in parts of England and Scotland who are preparing to spend a sixth night without electricity after Storm Arwen. Why the Welsh Government says there are too many second homes in Wales and that action is now needed. And the art installation depicting a traditional Irish pub. It's been named as the winner of this year's Turner Prize.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News Channel, a busy night in the Premier League with 6 matches, including the Merseyside derby between Everton and Liverpool.
Welcome to BBC News at 10, which comes from Cardiff tonight and the new headquarters of BBC Wales in the heart of the Welsh capital. Now, during the day, ministers from Scotland, Northern Ireland, England and here in Wales held talks to coordinate their efforts on the rollout of the booster programme. A target of the end of January to complete the programme has been agreed in England and Scotland, but as yet, Wales and Northern Ireland have not signed up to that date. NHS England is issuing detailed guidance to hospitals, to pharmacists and GPs about expanding the booster rollout, but doctors' leaders today have expressed concern about the extra burden at a very challenging time. Our health editor, Huw has more details.
A vaccination centre on Anglesey, preparing like so many others around the UK to fire up the booster programme. It's a big ask for the NHS at a time of intensifying winter pressures. And the Welsh Health Minister says help will be sought across local communities.
We recognise that the workforce is absolutely exhausted, which is why we are really making sure that the net is really cast much wider this time to make sure that we can ask those volunteers to come back in.
The Minister said firefighters and military personnel could be deployed, but GPs in Wales have warned it'll need big vaccination centres to be set up again, rather than relying on their practices.
Where GPs have the time and aren't exhausted and wish to contribute as they did initially, then they could help with these centres. But at the moment, from a general practice point of view, and within our own infrastructure, we really are under the cosh.
This pharmacist in Hull, like others, is increasing opening hours to offer booster jabs 7 days a week, responding to the call by ministers to tackle the threat of the new variant.
That the best way to continue to defend ourselves is through our fantastic vaccine programme, and that's exactly why we're expanding the booster programme.
Hospitals will be part of the push to get more boosters done, expanding their existing vaccination hubs to give more slots to members of the public. This centre and others like it have been asked to create a lot more capacity. That'll mean extra appointments, but also possibly having to find more space, which will be far from straightforward. Of course, it'll also mean more staff from the hospital moving to do the jabs. The medical director told me that however busy, her colleagues would rise to the challenge.
I can't overstress the commitment there is amongst nurses and doctors to make sure that people get vaccinated. If I was to ask just every one of our doctors and every one of our nurses to do one extra shift to do some vaccination, that would be a lot of vaccinators.
Today, Monica, who's a teacher, came to get jabbed. She was eligible and had her booster.
I feel I need to protect the people I work with because I'm surrounded by people all day, every day. and children from different backgrounds, different family setups.
Health officials in Scotland have repeated advice to people to get a lateral flow test before going to family gatherings over Christmas. And in Northern Ireland, there have been warnings of disruption in schools before the Christmas break because of a shortage of teachers, partly linked to COVID isolation. It's another reminder that while we don't know enough about the new variant, the virus as it is now is still spreading.
And we can talk to Huw now, Huw Pym, our health editor, who joins us. Huw, can we talk about the kind of pressure there is, really, to get this booster programme delivered? And what, in logistical and practical terms, does that mean?
Well, Huw, this accelerated booster programme bringing millions more into its scope more rapidly than had been planned is going to involve, as we've been hearing, a huge effort in the UK's nations. But it's something which at least ministers, health officials, NHS staff, volunteers, pharmacists and other vaccinators can do something about. They can start getting involved. What they can't really influence is how quickly we learn more about this new variant. It had been thought that might take a matter of 3 weeks or more, but the World Health Organization has said today that we could get more information about how transmissible it is within days. And they also go on to say that actually some of the cases they've seen at least have been mild. But that still doesn't offer much clarity over what will happen in the weeks ahead for the public into the festive season. Now, Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, has made the point that for England, he would recommend lateral flow tests for people going to parties. He's saying don't cancel your plans, but get those lateral flow tests. And that echoes advice given by Professor Jason Leach in Scotland, the National Clinical Director there. Again, don't change your plans, get those lateral flow tests. And he added also, it might be an idea for your gathering to ensure or ask if people are vaccinated. So still there's a message there about caution, at least until we know more about Omicron.
Huw, many thanks again. Huw Pym, our health editor, with the latest thoughts there. Let's have a look then at the latest official data on the pandemic in the UK. It shows there were just under 49,000 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. On average, there were just over 43,500 new cases reported per day in the past week. The latest figures show there were over 7,500 people in hospital being treated for coronavirus yesterday. 171 deaths were recorded of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. And on average in the past week means that 122 COVID-related deaths were recorded every day. There have been now more than 145,000 deaths linked to COVID in the UK. On vaccinations, more than 18.5 million people have now had that booster jab. Well, Boris Johnson has refused to deny reports that Christmas parties were held in Downing Street last year, but he insisted that no COVID rules were broken. At Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, accused Mr Johnson of hypocrisy for ignoring the rules that he'd imposed on everyone else. Our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, has the story and a warning there is some flash photography coming up.
Good cheer? Was there too much of it in number 10 last year? When COVID rules meant schmoozing like this in Downing Street was most definitely not allowed.
Is that good gin, Prime Minister?
Reports this morning suggested a boozy party had happened behind the shiny black door.
Should we cancel Christmas parties?
A political opportunity too tempting for the opposition leader to let pass.
Keir Starmer.
As millions of people were locked down last year, was a Christmas party thrown in Downing Street for dozens of people on December the 18th?
What I can tell the right honourable gentleman is that all guidance was followed completely during number 10. And can I recommend to the right honourable gentleman that he does the same with his own Christmas party.
Boris Johnson himself wasn't at the said event, but didn't squash the suggestion it happened.
He's not denied it. He says no rules were broken. Both of those things can't be true, Prime Minister. He's taking the British public for fools.
At a time when public health messaging is so vital, how are people possibly expected to trust a Prime Minister when he thinks it's one rule for him and one rule for everybody else?
They should concert their line of attack more closely. I've said before that he's talking total nonsense.
This might jangle nerves for the government right now, because this place is waiting anxiously for more information about the new COVID variant. Will MPs be asked to back tighter rules again? The government repeat the sudden clampdown of last Christmas?
We've spoken to an attendee of the alleged gathering on the 18th of December last year. They said there were several dozen people there with food and drink and games, and it went on past midnight. Reasonable interactions in a workplace were then allowed, but socialising was meant to be off limits. Lockdown was back the next day. 12 months on, with doubts again about this Christmas, it is deeply awkward for Number 10.
For now, the Prime Minister and, of course, the public must wait in a kind of limbo. The countdown to clarity about the new COVID variant could still take a couple of weeks. And until then, none of us can know what this Christmas will bring. Laura Kunzberg, BBC News, Downing Street.
Well, at Westminster, the government has outlined more details of its 10-year plan to reform the social care system in England. While reforms, including an £86,000 cap on care costs, were outlined in September, today's announcement details how they'll spend £1.7 billion of money, which is raised by a new health and social care levy. Now, the government will be investing £300 million in housing, with a focus on increasing the range of new supported housing options. And £500 million will be spent on the social care workforce over the next few years. The focus there will be on training for staff. But Labour says the plan falls woefully short of the mark and fails to deal with immediate pressures facing the social care system. Our social affairs editor, Alison Holt, reports now.
Click clinician in the corner and then push go.
This is the sort of gym session that helps Steve maintain his strength.
Well, it's set for an hour, but I won't.
He broke his neck in a car accident as a teenager. He has live-in support as well as daily visits from care workers like Jasmine.
There you go, come on.
The ambition of the government plans is to make it easier for more people to live independently, partly with the help of technology and adapted housing.
Obviously, I can do so much myself, but there's a lot I can't do. And that's where the carers come in.
How important is it that the government gets this right and really invests in care?
Definitely. Unless a miracle does happen with me, but it's I'm going to need it for, the rest of my life.
So far, no delays in the medication.
There'll be money to ensure more care staff get the sort of regular training that Jasmine receives, but the plans stop short of a professional register for care workers and don't address pay.
It is a skilled role. The things that we have to do out in the community, I don't think people realise. We're taking responsibility when we're administering medication. We're trusting that a pharmacy has filled out a blister pack correctly, and we're taking responsibility for that.
Help people with minor repairs and minor changes.
In the House of Commons, the Care Minister describes the 10-year plan as a significant step forward after past governments have failed to act.
The reform of social care in this country is an issue that has been ducked for far too long. But we'll do whatever it takes on this tough challenge, and we will do this to get it right.
Ministers have utterly failed to deal with the immediate pressures facing social care as we head into one of the most difficult winters on record. And they have failed to set out the long-term vision and more fundamental reforms we need to deliver a care system fit for the future.
So I'm going to have a look at other alternatives.
And care providers like this Hertfordshire home care company are already juggling increasing demand and staff shortages. They welcome many of the ideas in the government plans, but say the extra funding won't come soon enough to deal with current pressures.
2 or 3 weeks ago, we had 100 people waiting in our local hospital for home care that couldn't be accommodated. And that's not just by us as a provider, that's by other providers as well. But they couldn't be accommodated because we just do not have enough people to facilitate that.
Can you just move the seat?
For many involved in care, the plans are an important starting point. The next step is to see changes happening on the ground. Alison Holt, BBC News.
Now, tens of thousands of people in the north of England are preparing to spend a 6th night without electricity after Storm Arwen left infrastructure badly damaged. Energy networks say that at present there are around 30,000 households still without power. 15,500 of those are in the northeast of England, some 7,000 in the northwest of England, and 7,500 in different regions of Scotland. Now, power has now been restored to almost every home in Wales, as our correspondent Fiona Trott explains.
Another day and another problem.
If we can move all this here.
Engineers from across England trying to restore power in Northumberland.
We've been without power since about 7 o'clock on Friday night, and we've coped, but boy am I glad to see these people, and apparently they're from Bedford as well.
In neighbouring County Durham, a visit from the Energy Minister Greg Hands. But when you've been without energy for 6 days, the frustration starts to show.
The government has said that we will stand behind assistance. We're working closely with the British Red Cross, making sure that that assistance gets to people.
But I do think you're kidding yourself. You've got Red Cross. I don't see Red Cross here. Okay? You can mention whatever you like at your level.
Yeah.
You're talking a different world to my level.
Ruller, come here.
These farming communities are a world away from Westminster. The challenge here in Doddington is milking 300 cows twice a day and relying on one generator.
We have to have electricity to run the machines to milk cows, and it won't wait.
Otherwise they get very uncomfortable, you get health problems, mastitis, etc.
In Aberdeenshire, this couple in Torf Finns are relying on one fire in one room.
As time has gone on, I think we've become more and more ragged and exhausted. No lighting, and so it's really been a struggle. And slowly, this granite building is getting colder and colder.
In areas like these, people are used to working together in a crisis, but as the days go on, they say they need more than community spirit. Fiona Trott, BBC News, Northumberland.
The Women's Tennis Association has suspended all tournaments in China. The move is in response to concerns about the well-being of the Chinese player Peng Shuai, who disappeared from public view for 3 weeks after accusing a top Chinese official of sexual assault. The WTA chief, Steve Simon, said he had serious doubts about claims that she was free, safe and not subject to intimidation. Now, students at 58 universities in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland are facing 3 days of disruption because staff have started a strike over pay, pensions and working conditions. The University and College Union says that workloads have become unmanageable and it's warned that further walkouts may take place next year. But some students have expressed anger that, having paid thousands in fees, their learning is being disrupted again after 18 months of online learning because of the pandemic. Our education editor, Branwen Jeffries, has the latest.
Fed up with their workload, angry about pay and pension changes, university lecturers say they have no option but to strike. Shall we pop in here? I'd met Freya, who teaches on degree courses, unsure what their future is as a university academic.
So I have to reapply for my job every year. I have no guaranteed hours or guaranteed employment in future.
The union says young academics could lose a third of their future pension. There is a hole in the pension fund, but the size of it is disputed. The issues behind this strike have been brewing for years. But most of all, the feeling that teaching in a university, which used to be a very secure job, is now much more vulnerable and uncertain. In Belfast, support from passing drivers. Lecturers at some universities in both Northern Ireland and in Scotland are also on strike. So what do students make of the disruption?
It worries me a little bit, but I think for me, I support it.
I wouldn't want to be assessed on something that we didn't actually get taught, but I think at the same time we don't mind too much the situation that we might miss some in-person lectures.
The USS trustee who runs the scheme has decided that more money is needed.
Speaking for universities in the pension scheme, one Vice-Chancellor told me change had to happen. Universities in England have been warned to minimise the effect of strikes on students.
There are many things that we can do in universities to make sure that the students don't suffer. We can change deadlines, we can change teaching methods.
More universities, including some in Wales, may join the strikes. Union members at another 42 are being reballoted, raising the prospect of more disruption in January. Branwen Jeffries, BBC News.
Here in Cardiff, the First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, has been addressing an issue that's been a growing cause of concern in parts of Wales for many years, and that's the number of second homes and holiday lets in some areas. Mr Drakeford says there are too many of them, and they're affecting Welsh communities and property prices. The Welsh Labour government, supported by Plaid Cymru, is proposing some tax increases and more planning controls to contain the trend. Now, Wales has seen average house prices rise by 15.4% this year, and that's the biggest increase in the UK. And in some coastal villages, such as Abersoch on the Llŷn Peninsula, nearly half the housing comprises second homes and holiday lets. From there, our Wales correspondent, Huw Edwards, sent this report.
Winter and Abersoch is in hibernation. On this picturesque part of Llŷn, almost half of the houses are holiday homes. The average property price is now £700,000. Tom grew up here, but is priced out of his community and living in a caravan.
Who is he?
He's a plumber, Charlotte is a hairdresser. They've been on the list for a council house for over a year, in which time little Tom has arrived. This is where they'll spend their first family Christmas, while most of the houses in Abersoch will be vacant.
It's just heartbreaking, really, seeing them so empty, and we're here trying to raise our family.
You try and give it to the community, and then you can't live in the community they want to live in. We've got as much right as anybody else to be living here. But the prices are just way beyond us.
The problems here on the Llŷn Peninsula are acute, but they're not unique. Like parts of Cornwall and the Lake District, over decades it's become a haven for holiday homes. But during the pandemic, issues have exacerbated, prices have shot up and tensions have deepened. It's led to a new wave of protests calling on the Welsh Government to act, especially in communities where the future of the Welsh language is under threat. On the Llŷn, second home owners already have to pay an extra 100% in council tax. Further increases could follow, as well as planning controls. But some of the owners feel they're being blamed when the real failure is the shortage of affordable housing.
We are being used as a scapegoat because they're failed national policies. If I was a politician, do I want to stand up and say I have failed in my duty to nominate the number of homes I've needed 10 years ago? I'll blame someone else. I'll blame the second homeowners. That's easy to do.
The First Minister says there are too many second homes in some parts of Wales, but is he searching for a scapegoat?
Well, I never use the language of blame because I don't think that is helpful to anybody, and it's not what we're in the business of doing. What we are in the business of doing is trying to make sure that local people, and young people in particular, have a fair chance to go on living, growing up and contributing in the communities into which they were born.
Communities which may have already changed forever. On the Llŷn, some properties have been bought up by businesses to offer as holiday lets, houses which may never be homes again. While tourism brings in a regular tide of income and investment, what makes these places unique is in danger of being washed away. Huw Edwards, BBC News, Llŷn.
The US Supreme Court has begun hearing arguments in the most important case on abortion rights for half a century. The court is considering a law in the state of Mississippi which bans terminations after 15 weeks. A ruling isn't expected until next summer, but if the court, which is dominated by justices with a conservative mindset, finds in Mississippi's favour, it's expected that dozens of other states could ban or restrict abortions. Our correspondent, Sophie Long, has the story.
This is a regular scene outside the last remaining abortion clinic in the entire state of Mississippi.
Because it's murder. Murdering children is wrong, according to the God of the Bible.
The difficult and deeply personal decision that women who come here have made is judged very publicly. This is the front line in a bitter battle that's gone on for decades. Mississippi is trying to ban abortions after 15 weeks. If the Supreme Court rules in the state's favour, it will effectively roll back the law that's been in place for nearly half a century, known as Roe versus Wade. Pro-choice campaigners say that will threaten lives, and it's people here in the poorest communities that will feel the impact most.
We're just going out in the community, educating folks.
These students are spreading the anti-abortion message. They want the procedure banned without exception for incest or rape, and Lydia knows how that feels.
I actually was in that same situation.
I'm very sorry.
But I thought, and I was scared, but I was thinking, you know what, even if I am, it's just amazing that there's a child, possibly a baby, inside of me.
Even with the law still intact, many are already being forced to travel thousands of miles from states like Texas, where abortion is currently banned after just 6 weeks, to more liberal states to access the care they need.
So you're scrubbing for me, right?
One 19-year-old patient has come across half the country from Houston to Seattle. She was assaulted, did a pregnancy test that was negative, but over the following weeks, her body continued to change.
I was scared because I do not want any memory of that day, any connection to that person. I could not get any help for the pain I was going through. I just had to suffer in silence.
When people are controlling women's fertility and pregnant people's fertility under the guise that they're trying to protect their health, what they're really doing is they're really controlling that person's basic human right and dignity, and that is a form of human rights abuse.
The Supreme Court's decision will likely not come until next summer. Over the coming months, many will pray, others will hope it goes their side's way. Sophie Long, BBC News, Seattle.
An art installation depicting a traditional Irish pub has been unveiled as the winner of this year's Turner Prize. It was unveiled tonight. The piece by the Belfast-based Array Collective features photos and memorabilia and videos, some of them representing hidden political messages about sexuality and identity. Our correspondent David Silito reports from the ceremony in Coventry.
The winner of the Turner Prize 2021. And it is Array Collective.
Array Collective, a group of artists and activists from Northern Ireland whose Turner Prize winning artwork is a shebeen. This artwork, though, is more than just a pub. It's a symbolic place of good-natured debate and sanctuary from sectarian conflict.
This is your shebeen, your pub, but it's more than that. It's got a sort of a political overtone to it, hasn't it?
We don't all agree on everything, and we don't. The communities that we're even within and represent don't agree on everything, but we still agree to have a laugh together.
Array Collective's origins lie in liberal and progressive political campaigns, creating banners and costumes for street protests and rallies. An attempt to use art to bring a less combative mood to the street theatre of Northern Ireland politics.
We come at it from a point of view, it's better to come from a humorous point of view than an aggressive point of view. And I think you can start to challenge the conversation through humour rather than you do it through aggression.
Bringing a bit of civility to the debate.
Absolutely. And a human connection.
And a human
as well,
connection,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
This then is more than just a little drinking den. It's a desire to bring to our politics some of the gentle warmth and conviviality of a friendly pub. David Silito, BBC News, Coventry.
And that's all we have time for tonight from BBC News at 10. In this new building, in the heart of the Welsh capital, which houses radio, television and online services at BBC Wales. So from Cardiff, I'll say good night or nos da, and it's time for the news where you are. Bye for now.